Oh, sorry. I didn't see all the cameras there. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks.
You guys stupid.
How are you, Nick?
Oh, that's actually our entry.
Yes,
that's
sir.
We're doing it now.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the Uncovered podcast with Nick and Femi. This is really it.
Yeah.
Surprises. And another surprise is, for the whole episode, I'm going to be speaking in a different accent.
Okay, so what accent you speaking in this language?
Like right now, I'm from London still. You get
from
me?
London? It's going to
Yeah.
be such a terrible podcast to listen to, man. Please, let's not say that to the audience because people are going to automatically tune out.
That's crazy, bro. Because
you're talking Canadian now. I thought you said...
What are you talking about? I'm from London still.
Oh, okay. Now you're bringing it back. Okay.
But you know what? I can do a Canadian accent here because the thing is that the accents are kind of interchangeable, but like they're kind of similar still, bro. But for like on the real thing, like, man's from London, South.
Now, big man team, pick an accent. Stick to the accent this whole podcast.
I say no more.
We're good at that. So what are you citing? Because you've changed twice
London,
now. So London still?
London.
I bet we can have a conversation like that. I don't mind.
But it's crazy because like most of my family's from like London and that.
Same.
South Canada.
Yeah. Have you been before?
I have a few times.
What part?
South. West.
Oh, you've been
East.
all over?
Oh yeah, I'm from London, bro.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
So I'm saying, where you been in Sydney? You've been to South. Have you been to South Sydney? Like obviously, man.
That's a fair enough question.
That's why I answered, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Let's move on, innit?
Yeah,
my guy. Go.
All right, talk to me. So, obviously, in this episode, we back another one of the classics, and this time we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries and actually establishing healthy boundaries because I know that a lot of us, especially myself included, can be a challenge, right? There's times where you feel like, I don't want you to do this, or I'm getting pissed off because a friend said this. And we're going to kind of explore that in a lot of details because I think that establishing healthy boundaries is so vital, especially in friendships, relationships, or even just for yourself. We want to be able to establish that safety zone. So by us getting into it, let's kind of just first talk to the audience and define, like, what do we actually mean when we talk about setting healthy boundaries?
That's a great question, my guy. Like, I think the craziest thing when you're talking about healthy boundaries and them things there, yeah. Shout out to the Queen and them things there. Yo, Meghan Markle and all them. Yeah. It's crazy. Nah, but in terms of healthy boundaries, bro, like, it's what we always talk about. It's really that container kind of analogy that we're talking about. It's like that safety and being able to understand within that safety of like, okay, whoa, this is okay, this isn't okay. Do you know what I mean? And just having okay, this is where we're gonna play.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like if you're playing soccer or you're in a ring, in a boxing ring, there's like I can beat your head anywhere within these ring.
Yeah.
But when I step out of it, it's a completely different rules. And it doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of just establishing that in that relationship. It's like, yeah, when we're in this confinement, we can do whatever we want, but once we go out, it's not okay. You know what I mean? Like there is a line that you're crossing, and certain things are okay in one situation, certain things aren't okay in another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the big thing with that is that that's perfectly okay because I think that we get upset when we say like, yo, my boundaries have been crossed, or yo, I don't like it when you do this. And I think the cool thing about boundary setting is, like you were saying, it's that zone of safety. But I also think a big part of it is actually identity driven because what you start to realize is that for yourself, I don't like this. This makes me angry. This makes me upset. This makes me happy. You're kind of understanding yourself in a whole clearer picture. So establishing your boundaries and understanding where, like you said, this is my ring. Outside this ring pisses me off. When you say this makes me angry. Yeah. It's just giving you a lot more of an opportunity to actually understand yourself a lot more and actually understand how it is that you want to be shown up in this friendship or in this relationship.
What do I like? What don't I like?
Exactly.
What am I okay with?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think everybody I think sometimes we assume that what I'm not okay with, I should feel bad for not being okay with that. Exactly. So therefore I have that guilt around it. But in actual fact, there's a lot of things that people aren't actually okay with, and that's perfectly fine. That's what it is as being human beings. And I think that that's such a core area that we need to understand, which will allow people to get a clearer picture about what boundary setting actually is.
110%. So it's like, long story short, it's because a lot of times when we're getting frustrated, we're getting angry. It's not just because we're crazy. It's not because we're just like out of this world or silly. It's more just because it's letting you know that your boundaries are being crossed. Anger is a perfect example, right? Of my boundaries are being crossed, right? Like I might get upset at you for saying certain words about me. And that's a boundary. It's like, we can play and banter and have fun, but once you do this, I find that too far.
Yeah.
And that's good feedback to know for yourself.
I was just gonna say, it's excellent feedback, because a lot of times there's things that we're not even gonna know that pisses us off or makes us angry.
Exactly.
And now you know. So now
exactly.
you can put that to your list of like, okay, well, this is what I don't like, and things from there. So it seems like a big component of this obviously comes down to self-awareness and us being able to kind of understand self in this whole kind of play.
Yeah.
So why do you feel then that people kind of struggle to set boundaries?
Because it's hard. You know what I mean? Like that's the simplest way to put it. It's like, it's a very tough thing to do that, because it's like you have this fear when you're setting those boundaries, usually people that you love or people that you care about, right? That you're scared to lose them. They're scared that they'll stop loving you. They're scared that there'll be some kind of consequence. Overall, you're just scared of the consequence, right? Yeah. It's like, let's say you take the example, right? If you had a telemarketer come in there and ring you and start abusing you on the phone, right? But who the hell do you think you're talking to, bro? Are you feeling okay? And you say, there's no way I'm going to let you speak to me like that, right? You're much more likely to say that, because you have no kind of fear of the consequence associated with saying, I don't like you saying this to me.
Exactly.
Compared to if it's your partner, your best friend, your boss, all the people that you care about, you're unable to set those healthy boundaries because of the fear of the consequence. So it's obviously hard, and that's just it's a big thing. It's not an easy go home and change the world, change your whole world kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even if we look at it from like a trauma basis, and we look at like the conditioning that we had growing up, a lot of the influence from our external environment and the people that we brought into our life, they kind of set us up to how we actually meant to show and act in this world. And especially as men, you know, when we grow up in a society where we're told that, you know, men can't express emotions, or men don't cry, men should always keep like a strong face and never feel like anything upsets them. That makes it so challenging to set boundaries, because you feel like you're stepping out of your identity. You're stepping out as who you're actually meant to be.
And even on the inverse as well, or the whatever.
Yeah.
Even with women, I think that women really struggle with this in terms of like, you have to be this nurturing, supportive person 24/7. You are also the backbone of so many organizations and situations. So they're like, so that means oftentimes, like, when their kids ask them to do something, they don't say no. When their partner asks them to do something, they don't say no. When anybody, even then it transfers into their work life. They're constantly doing shit. They're constantly doing shit that they hate and they don't want to do. But because it's been ingrained in your conditioning that I have to be this person that is supportive and being there and doing stuff, and this is the only way I know how to do it, because I'm scared of also my conditioning, but also I'm scared of the consequence of it all. It's so problematic. It becomes like this massive cycle, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that we've spoken to a lot of clients as well, when people would say, okay, when I've tried to actually make a change off the back of it, and people obviously get the response that they wanted, because setting boundaries is a skill as well. Even though we're all entitled to be able to have our own boundaries, it's also really important that we understand how to communicate that, how not to offend people, and all those type of things. But what I was actually trying to say was that when I'm speaking to clients and they've tried
on what our program?
Yeah, on our program, the one that we have like 5,000 clients.
Yeah, on rechargewellness.com.au. Click get started.
Exactly.
Yep, $32 a week. That one. Oh, yeah, gotcha. That one. Okay, cool. Sorry, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we also have different options that are much. That one. Okay, those clients. Yeah, sorry.
Those clients. Yeah. When those clients try to implement something like this, and then it obviously doesn't go the way they wanted, because obviously we expect that people are gonna be like, oh, you've never been like this before. Like, what does this actually mean? Then they try to go get support, like from their family, their mothers, the people that can give them that condition. They're like, oh, well, maybe you're actually out of line here. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done this. And it makes it hard, especially when we're just talking about that cycle that is perpetual. It always happens, and you really need like a very safe environment, and you need to have that strong will to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think you said something that's perfect, man. Having a safe environment, because, you know, it's so easy to say, go set up these boundaries. But the same way that when you set up boundaries, or you set up a wall across your, a fence across your house or your country or your state, there's hard work involved, right? You don't just set it up there, you have to build it. It takes time. You have to dig the soil. You need to put things in place, set perimeters, and people are going to try to knock it down.
Exactly.
And it's just about building a stronger and stronger boundary. So it's very clear. Like, the wall of China is the perfect example. You know what I mean? They would have, I don't know the history of it, but they probably would have tried a million different things before getting set on this massive monstrosity of a structure to keep them out, because that's what they needed to do to set that kind of boundary. Exactly. So I think that, like, when you're setting those boundaries, it's like, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of skill that needs to be developed to be able to effectively communicate your desire for boundaries and safe environments.
100%. So I'm guessing, like, what majority of the audience I wanted to hear is like, okay, well, this is all well and good, Nick and Femi. Like, thanks for letting me know how hard boundary setting is, but what do I actually do? How do I actually set them? If I understand that my boundaries are constantly being crossed, and I want to start to be a bit more assertive and I want to be able to set my boundaries, how do I do it?
Yeah, I feel like there's a few things about boundary setting, right? It is abstract. There is a lot of abstract elements involved in it. However, there is kind of like clear formulas as well to be able to do it, right? And I guess, like, from an abstract kind of perspective, a lot of it needs to come from your ability to communicate and communicate effectively. So it being able to kind of like get your message out in a way that is received well, And I think the best way to be able to do that in a bit more concrete, tangible way is the I feel I want strategy.
Yeah.
So it's basically just saying, look, I feel blah, blah, that you hate me or you're disrespectful or whatever your feelings are. Make sure those are bad examples of what you should say, because the feeling should be very clear as to what you're feeling. Yeah. I feel like you're not respecting the fact that I'm right?
Yeah.
And I would want you to back me up a little bit more and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Which are perfect ways to be able to say, it's like, look, and then you now have positioned yourself that you can be like, look, I'm not saying you're doing anything. I'm not saying that you're intentional. I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm just saying, this is how I'm feeling that you're doing something. This is how I feel about it.
Exactly.
And what I would want to see out of this is this. But let's have a conversation about it.
Exactly. And I even think even before you then go into that communication piece, like you were saying, you need to kind of know what that is. What is it that you're feeling? So it's really, really important that we actually define, like, what is that boundary that's been crossed? Because a lot of the time, you might not even actually know. There might be so many pieces to this puzzle that are going on that you can't actually articulate what it is that you're feeling or why this frustrates you or why this makes you sad. So it's really, really important before you even get into that step of communicating, because that's a great skill, but you also want to have the awareness and giving yourself the permission to kind of understand what it is that I'm feeling, define it so you can articulate it because someone can understand, because the hard thing about emotions is that it's intangible.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So we can't actually, like, I can't just show you it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I have this many angers.
Exactly. So you need to be able to communicate it so the person can receive it in a very clear way. And then when you move into that I feel I want strategy, it's a lot more receptive.
Of course.
It's like, I can understand it, be clear about it, it makes sense. You know what you want off the back of this, and that's great. We can then move on from there, which I think is excellent. Yeah, and even doing that kind of strategy as well, the hardest thing about it is that it's good to have the tools and the skills to do it, but you need to also give yourself the permission to feel like I can actually establish boundaries, and that's okay.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that. Me saying no, me feeling upset by you doing this and no longer you wanting to continue it anymore, it's perfectly okay. That's your right. And you have the permission to do so. And I think that's a really, really important thing when you're going through this process of wanting to establish some boundaries, that we understand that at the core, being like, yep, this is my given right. It doesn't mean that you need to be arrogant or a prick about it, but you just understand that I don't have to tolerate that, and that's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think there's a lot of like strategies in terms of assertiveness training, because I think there's a lot of people become victims, right, to their circumstance because of their inability to assert their boundaries.
Exactly.
I think it's a very important skill to have. So anyone that's going through that, I think that you should definitely seek a bit more support in terms of how to actually do that. And speaking of being able to seek support, we're gonna just go to a quick little ad break, and we'll teach you, Zach. We'll tell you the best next steps on how to actually seek support. So see you on the other side.
Peace. Cool. So we concluded about talking about staying assertive and why it's so important and that it's a skill that we need to learn. But why do you feel like a lot of people struggle to stay assertive, and why do you feel like this is actually so important that people take the time to learn this skill?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were saying. It's the fear of the consequence, right? It's the fear of okay, all right, so let's take it a couple steps back. Innately as human beings, primarily want to be loved. Everything we do in terms of the way we interact is all from a deep sense of desire to be loved. And people think that we don't realize it, but it is at the end of the day. You wear clothes because you want to be loved. You talk because you want to be loved. You brush your teeth because you want to be loved. You shower because you want to be loved. It sounds really like over the top and a few steps behind, but that's like the deeper reason for it. So when we're assertive, it's going to go against that the smoothness of being able to achieve that goal. Yeah. So that obviously kind of like breeds fear in terms of like, okay, well, if I do this, as I mentioned earlier, if I do this, okay, this person is no longer going to love me. Yeah. And then that's obviously scary and your brain is wired to keep you safe and they will tell you not to do it. Exactly. So that's kind of like the simplest way to articulate it, I guess. Probably not the simplest way, but it's a way.
It is a way. And I think that's you've nailed that pretty clearly because like you said, we want to feel loved innately. That's why we do a lot of the things that we do. Sometimes we think we just do it out of habits and it's just like, that's because that's what everybody does. But there's actually a deeper reason.
Yeah, I feel like it goes to like the thing about like people pleasing. Let me ask you, because I know that like, let me ask you, do you feel like there's ever been a time where you were really, because you've mentioned it on the podcast before, so I wanted to ask you. You're going to say
something a little bit different. So maybe just word it the way you were going to word it before, eh?
Okay. I was trying to be nice. Like, that's what I mean. Like, when I'm trying to change my ways.
You're about, because you were a people pleaser before. That's what you were going to say to me.
Because you were a self-proclaimed people pleaser, is what I was going to say.
Yeah, which is fine. But I'm just like, why did you change it?
Because I was trying to be nice.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing, but I was trying to be nicer.
Ah, okay.
Yes. Different. Okay, yeah, I'm different.
Yeah.
So long story short, you're a little bitch. Nah, I'm joking. But like you obviously like you're a self-proclaimed people pleaser. So what was that kind of experience like? And what was your thought process as to why you were doing that? Because I don't think you're that at all anymore. I think you're quite the opposite.
Not the complete opposite. Not the complete opposite. But you know, for me, when I was, because that stage for me was a bit more like earlier in my life, like more when I was like in high school, like in primary school, going into high school, that was a big thing. And I think my thought process, and again, this comes back to conditioning because every time I grew up going to African parties, hanging with like parents and stuff like that, I was always conditioned to be like, don't say what I actually feel, like just be nice to people and let's not create any conflict or arguments. And obviously that then continued on for the rest of my life where it was like, well, we just want to be a family that's, you know, very... what's the last list? We just want to be a family that's just like, we don't create any beef. We're just here. We do our thing. We're nice. We're polite. That's all it is that we did. And that was kind of how my upbringing was. So any time that I would say something,
good intention, very good intention.
Yeah, exactly. It was
well intentioned.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we do always comes from like, or not all of the things, but some of the things that most of us do come from a good intention that we think of. And I think that, you know, obviously off the back of that, because I remember when I was a kid, when I would ever, you know, just young, loudmouth, say whatever you want, I would then go out and just run my mouth and say something that then had an impact on what my parents' kind of image was perceived to be. So then I would get home and I'd get belted. So then I was taught, like, don't run your mouth like that because you're damaging the reputation of the family and all that kind of stuff. And that obviously left onto my adulthood or me being a teenager. So growing up, when I was in high school, like a lot of the things that I would do for people like my friends and family, obviously I had good intention and I love my friends, but there was times where I'd be exhausted and I got all these responsibilities and things that I'm doing, but I would still do it because I felt that if I didn't do it, then my reputation that I built up being this nice guy, this person that's happy, just very relaxed and chill, it's going to be tarnished if I then say no to this or if I don't give this person money and I don't do all these things.
Give people money.
Yeah, give people money. Not like money as like give them money, but as in be like, yo, like, I give you money to be honest.
Nah, you did.
I did.
That's it.
But not really giving money, but it's just like buying people stuff. Like, buy this pizza.
Taking you out, like putting you out, sorry.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, it all still comes with good intent. I would still do it, but there was obviously an element where I knew subconsciously that I'm like, well, you know, I don't really feel comfortable doing this, but I wasn't assertive enough to set that boundary.
So when you were doing this stuff, did you know that you didn't want to do it? And did you know that you were doing it just to keep this person happy?
I don't think I had the clearest awareness that that's exactly what I was doing as much as I know now. But I think that ideally I had an awareness that I didn't want to do this. Yeah. But then I think the brain is interesting because it will kind of convince yourself reasons as to why this is okay and why you should do it. Yeah. That's the interesting thing about our programming is that it's like we feel like we can always justify things and make it make logical sense so that we don't feel bad about this particular action that we've done. So that was kind of like what I would kind of justify it on. It's like, oh, it's okay. Like, you know, it's not a big deal. Well, he's done stuff like that for you before, but even though, and it's not saying that it needs to be reciprocated directly, but it's just like, you get to a point where you can feel like if you're being overly used, then it's like, you can so at some degree have an understanding that that's happening.
Yeah.
And I felt like, that was kind of a thing. And obviously it comes back to the root of what you're saying. It was that desire to want to be liked, that desire to want to be loved, that desire to want to have friends and people that you can speak to and you can be relied on. That's where it was being fueled from.
Yeah. So what made you actually change? I know that you mentioned previously, like people have like taught, we're bringing it to your psyche. But ultimately things start from things ultimately change when you decide to change.
Exactly.
So what was it that made you actually change? Because it wasn't like you had a conversation with someone and you're like, I'm enlightened. And I'm going to change my whole life. What was your moment? What was your aha moment?
I can't really think of an aha moment. I think what happened was that obviously you're hearing it multiple times. Like you were a big guy that was saying in my ear and amongst other people as well. So you hear it for a lot of time. Again, you still try to justify it in your head. But then I think there was a time, which kind of goes back to the first point I was saying about like my identity and who it is that I actually am. I think that when I might have been listening to like a video or I don't know, I might have been in a particular moment. I can't really forecast a full image for you guys, but I was watching something and it came back to come down to, well, who are you at your core at the end of the day?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to please anybody regardless.
Who are you at the end of the day?
Who am I at the end of the day? Well, that's a big question, but I have 3 core things that I like to kind of pinpoint everything that I do, my values on. One of those things is connection. I feel like I'm somebody, and the thing about it is that these terms mean so much. They're just like a term. But I'm not going to go and expand on them.
Of course.
But the one thing that I think is that I thrive on connection and being able to connect with people in a very intimate kind of way, platonic, romantic, those type of relationships. I feel that's something that I thrive for, and that's who I am. I'm somebody that loves growth. I'm like the ability to kind of learn, go out of my comfort zone and do all those kind of things. Yeah. And I think ultimately I'm a compassionate dude as well. I can give the space and hold space for people and be that container of safety is kind of who I perceive myself to be at the moment. And that's kind of how I do things these days. So then going back to your question, I think that when I was able to kind of understand, who I am at the end of the day and be unapologetic about that, that's then when I was able to make that shift. And that shift wasn't extreme, being like, I'm going to cut everybody off and I'm not going to do that. But it was just more being able to be like, okay, look, like I can't do this. Yeah, just say no. And that's okay. And as soon as I understood that that's okay, then I was able to then continue to do it for the rest of my life and still do so.
Yeah, and obviously you got comfortable saying no. Got very comfortable, actually, a bit too comfortable, but that's another conversation. But like, how did you start to realize what no actually means? Like, what did it start to mean to you? Because it wouldn't have just represented, a rejection letter. It's like no has a lot more of a meaning to you. So,
exactly.
So what does that? What did that mean to you?
Yeah, and like you said, at the start, I used to think it was just a rejection letter. Was saying no was me giving my friendship away. That's what I kind of viewed it as. But now I understand that saying no is actually self-care. Saying no is looking out for myself and understanding that I have my own needs as well, and I got my own things that I want to do. It also goes back to kind of my identity and my values, like who am I at the actual core. And is this what you're asking me to do or whatever's happening in this situation, does it kind of align with those values? Because if it doesn't, then, one, if you do it, you're kind of doing a disservice to yourself because you understand who you are. If you got clear clarity on your values and you do something that's against your value, then you're doing yourself a disservice off the back of that. But then on top of that as well, it allows you to stay strong as to who you believe you are, and you can show up in a lot more of a grounded and certain way when you do things, and people still off the back of that with all your other actions and things will still be able to kind of get that feel for you anyway. And as soon as I was able to kind of understand what saying no's means and not let that mean that people are going to take my friendship for granted off the back of that, then that's how I was able to do it, and that's kind of how I still view it.
Yeah, and I think that a good strategy that you've really adopted before saying yes or no, because I know that I think that you're a perfect example of this type of thing. Yeah. And I know that this is the topic that's really, really powerful for you. Yeah. And I think that obviously watching your transition firsthand, I think a big thing that you learned, because I do think that initially you started, off the back of it, of saying no, you just started saying no, and you were even saying that you're saying no to things that you still wanted to do, but you just felt like you would say no so that people wouldn't take advantage of you. Which is normal. I think people do that and then it becomes problematic. Yeah. But I think the big thing that, a big strategy I'd love you to share light on, and what you do currently, is you really pause and you really take your time before giving an answer, whether it's face-to-face, over text, over email, over the phone, whatever it is. You really, really pause and think about your answer before giving that answer to somebody. So what's the thought process behind that, and why is that effective? Is it effective?
I think it's incredibly effective, and I can't really shine any more light on the strategy because it's that simple. It's like literally just pause, take a second. And the reason why I found that to be so powerful, because I used to be very, very reactive. I used to be the type of person I'm like, someone say something, I'm just going to react straight away without being able to kind of like, have any of you guys had that moment where like you get into an argument with a friend and you what? But you get into an argument with a friend, or you had an argument with your family, like a family member. You just have an argument for hours, and then you go up to your shower and you think about like, damn, this argument could have really finished like 5 minutes ago or like 2 hours earlier, but you just kept entertaining the argument because you felt the need to. It's a reactive kind of process. You realize that, well, this could have been done, and you know what, you're actually right, I hear your point. But because we didn't pause in that moment, we didn't give ourselves the ability to be able to process and understand that. And I think that's when I started to realize the power of pausing. And that's not even just in conflict or when you're having a conversation with someone, but that's with everything. Interviews, public speaking, responding to your friends. Taking that second to pause, because in my head, I used to think that 2 to 3 seconds to pause is such a long time.
Imagine
it's going to be so awkward. People are going to hear everything, but it's actually nothing. People don't even realize that I take a pause or you take a pause. And I think that as soon as you can practice it, then it becomes a great thing, because it allows you to answer and do anything from like you can kind of analyze subjectively and objectively what you feel is best at the moment. And then you can just kind of just springboard into that without any guilt or anything. So that's why I love it.
And I think that like you said, when you're making that pause, it's not a million years.
Yeah.
You're still flowing with the conversations. No one's going to think that you're thought blocked or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
that's it. You don't want that.
So it's not that severe. But I think that a big thing that you mentioned or you touched on was that like it allows you to make a decision that you're happy with, and you know that you've made that decision. You didn't just say some shit, because sometimes we get ourselves in situations like I feel like I shouldn't have ever made that decision. You know what I mean? Because like I didn't think about it. But sometimes like you're like you know what, I'm in this shit situation, but I made my bed. You know what I mean? I chose this. And I can be, because you're not always going to make the right decision, but it's like, look, this was my decision.
Exactly.
And I'm happier with that than I am with just saying, feeling pressured. Okay, fine.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I think it's the big thing about all of this is having that self-awareness to stop, having that kind of giving yourself the permission and the space to pause and slow down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just really understand that the world isn't going to collapse in 2 to 3 seconds. So
absolutely,
chill out.
Exactly. And even just on that, the best way with this, going back to, you know, how we set boundaries and this topic of self-care and saying no, is that it all comes down to practice at the end of the day.
Exactly.
There's never going to be a day when you feel like I've completely mastered it. You'll be better and you'll be able to recognize the progress, but there's always times that you're going to get triggered. There's going to be another trauma and something that you didn't witness, and it will happen from there. So just keep practicing it, guys, and you'll be able to get there at the end. But on that note, that was an excellent podcast. I hope you guys really, really enjoyed it. We're going to be putting out a lot more better content for you guys to come and listen to. So if you guys want anything, you know where to reach out to us. If you got any questions that you want us to answer, let us know, and we'll go from there.
Peace and love.